Kia ora tātou. E mihi anō e tātou mai, I tae mai I te pōnei, for some more korero this evening at the Kaeo office with our team and with our people here this evening. We have a story we'd like to share as usual, and ngā mihi mō ngā tuku korero. Nō reira, kia ora tātou.
Yeah, Bryce, I've got a question for you. How do we, as tangata whenua Māori, find out more about our history, our true history and our culture, given that historians are largely responsible for writing and or recording our known history?
Kia ora, Wallace. That's a good topic to discuss, because it's become very, very clear throughout Aotearoa here, especially with the first term of the Labour government, where an attempt was made, and we're still making attempts to simply have the opportunity to tell our own story. So from that, the elders did a lot of research over the years, Wallace, and there was a discovery, and I'll say it like that, of a philosophy of the historians, as you've said, in the way they recorded our culture and our history here, always under the opinion of the recording that was taken and the mindset of that person and what they wanted to achieve as far as the information was recorded. And as we know, the first recorded history for Aotearoa was they came here, discovered it, when in fact orders were given. There was the first piece of misinformation. And then the labels that allowed the recordings that were taken to be appropriate, you know, the label savages and uneducated and all those consistent things. So what was discovered by the elders many, many years ago was the philosophy that these people that recorded our history used. And it was simple. It was used, the philosophy that was used to record our culture, Wallace, was called Antithesis. Antithesis is an interesting philosophy of recording. It's simply the difference between black and white, or the difference between up and down. So it was basically, in a nutshell, the total opposite. And as we know, one of the stories that we were taught in schools, you know, people our age, I'll say it like that, when they talked about the Treaty of Waitangi, there's an instance of antithesis. The Māori text was signed at Waitangi and the English text was signed at Port Waikato, but everybody's moving on the English text when we've only just brought up to light the Māori text, or the antithesis of what the historians has told. And it's riddled right throughout our history. So the discovery of the use of antithesis, and if I can just use a simple example, Wallace, to explain antithesis. So if we begin by, this is a A4 pieces of paper, and this is our story, okay? That's our history, that's our culture. The antithesis philosophy simply turned our story upside down, right? And then back to front. And that's what we've got today. If you're in a tribunal process or if you're in a judiciary process, that's what you've got to get access to from those archives. All right, so it's very, very pleasing to know that that philosophy was used in the first instance, and that philosophy was discovered in the second instance by our ancestors from the question you've asked, how do we find out, was to simply get what they've got and simply reverse it. And there's our story. Okay, and it is that simple. if I can, Wallace, thank you for your question. It's there are a lot of explanations around my teaching from the elders on using antithesis or discovering antithesis and how do we find the truth. If I can, Wallace, we delivered this to the Waitangi Tribunal as well as a whole heap of other stuff, and the elders used the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. All right. And we'll just go through that very, very quickly. The myth and legend, or the fairy tale, they call it. These are the labels they give our history when they apply antithesis. So the fairy tale was Jack's mother said, "Son, can you take the cow to the market, the milking cow to the market and sell it because we're very poor and we need food." Yes, Mum, I'll do that. On the way to the market, Jack met a person who had some seeds and he traded the cow for some seeds. He got home, got into a bit of conflict with his mother because his mother needed the resources to buy food, supposedly. And she threw the seeds out the kitchen window. The next morning, the seeds had turned into a giant beanstalk. Jack climbed the beanstalk as an explorer, okay, to discover what was at the top of the beanstalk. And what Jack discovered was a giant's house. And then, we know the story. He grabbed the singing harp, he grabbed the goose that laid golden eggs, and a few other things. And, we know that story. And if I can, the conclusion of that story, and they lived happily ever after, and rightly so. Now, when you apply antithesis to that story, or let's make this very clear, when we do that to it, okay, this is what we find as far as an Indigenous culture is concerned, trying to rediscover your own history. And you can do this in any Indigenous culture around the world, is we find that in the first instance, Jack disobeyed a very, very strict instruction from his mother. He didn't sell the cow at the market. He was distracted easily. When the beanstalk grew, he climbed the beanstalk. And in the first case, he trespassed on another culture's land. He broke an entry into that other culture's whare. He committed burglary by stealing the singing harp and the goose with the golden laying the golden eggs. And I'm going to say at this particular point in time, just to be clear with antithesis, out of greed and selfishness, he took those things home. At a point in time, Jack went up the beanstalk again and committed home invasion. And there's proof of home invasion because the giant made the very clear statement, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman." And that's because Jack was inside his house and he had been caught. Jack returned home. All the giant wanted, or this Indigenous person wanted, was his belongings back, or just to be clear, his taonga that belonged to him. And as he was climbing down the beanstalk, Jack chopped down the beanstalk and be very clear about this, killed the giant. Right now, committed murder. And the end of the story, unfortunately, and the antithesis is still the same, and they lived happily ever after. So these are a little example, Murray, of the use of antithesis, and it becomes very interesting when you put a whole heap of historical documents in front of you, apply antithesis, and you'll get very close to the truth of what actually is being hidden. Kia ora tātou.
Awesome, Bryce. So it's really the antithesis to finding our history then is about unpicking all of that. Well, I guess the thesis of who we are and everything that happened to us as a culture and as a people. How do we go about that, to unpick that, unpack it?
Oh, yeah, no, good question. Another good question, Wallace. There's a way of doing that. And it's to do with accepting that the historian is not telling the truth. So it has to, and here's another sharing of a story, if I can, and it's from one of our people called Maui. All right, let's do an antithesis on Maui slowing down the sun. Okay, and let's just get to that part. Now, as we know, Maui plaited a rope and concluded with we know that myth and legend because they call that our story a myth and legend. Their stories, Wallace, they call fairy tales. Right, ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posy. That's to do with the Black Death. It's a fairy tale, or it's a nursery rhyme. Interesting. The antithesis of that song they let children sing on the school playground, yet it refers to the Black Death. These are clear example of the use of antithesis. But this case of Maui slowing down the sun, Wallace, when the story is being told to the mokopuna in Kohanga Reo today, when you unpack that with our cultural fact, okay, so let's look at our te taiao, let's look at our universe, taka ki te rangi, right? Let's look at it. So if you hold that universe in front of you as a picture, okay, and then you have to ask yourself the question, Maui slowed down the sun. Have a look at the sun, Wallace. Does the sun move or do the planets move around it? So what did he slow down? The sun doesn't move. The earth goes around it, right? So the mokopuna is sitting there going, oh no, slowing down the sun is it's impossible. They carry that through their life. But when you unpack the antithesis and you find out that he didn't actually slow down the sun as a metaphor, what he actually did was he slowed down the earth. Because you can't slow down something that's not moving. So we look at that metaphor of slowing down the sun, we come out with, well, from a mokopuna reading or hearing that story, slowing down the earth is a lot easier than slowing down the sun. These any story, myth and legend you pick, any document you pick up, challenge yourself to go through that and find, did my tupuna really behave like this? No, they didn't. And you really get to know our culture really, really well because of it being hidden so blatantly, like the Transformers in plain sight. Kia ora, Wallace.
I appreciate that, Bryce. And I think, just from my own perspective, I'd look at that and think that there are so many paradigms where, for want of a better term, that have been misapplied or how do I say this, where a lot of the concepts in our minds are that we're seeing things as they've been explained to us. And what you just explained then is that unpacking and unpicking of all of that to try and find our way to the truth. And I mean, from my own perspective of, let's say, finding out about our history. Before I came back from Australia, I had no clue about much of it because of that. But to know that now it's a matter of trying to use that concept of antithesis, and I've never heard that before I came home either, Bryce, but no, I appreciate that. I think it's given me a little more appreciation of how to view some of these things, because all is not what it seems.
I mean, I understand, Wallace. Google is not where you find the truth about our culture. Being a Google tohunga, there's too many Google tohungas around. There's too many rangatira web searches around. There's too many where we're attacking one another with someone else's story about our culture. Wallace, and I just encourage to use the antithesis, or more to the point, there's an easier way. Talk to your grandparents, talk to the old people, and they'll give
Kia ora,
you
Bryce, appreciate that.
Freely. All right, kia ora. Thank you, Wallace.
Bryce, I wanted to ask, obviously in the Western world's history, we write everything down, which is completely different to Indigenous peoples. So we've found that we have modern historians that interpret the past, and we have historians
she go? Okay.
Uh-oh.
Kia ora, Karen.
So what I'd like to say is that given all of that information, do we need to change our interpretation of what we're reading and what we're seeing, whether it's written and printed, whether it's on rock, stone, bone and other artifacts, from a metaphoric point of view, from analogy, from a spiritual point of view, because we really don't know with things from the past what the context was or what the perception was, because even words, even individual words have changed so much, so there can be a mass change in how we see a word now as to how it was in times past. How does that affect the interpretation of your history or anyone's history for that matter?
Oh, kia ora, Karen. I appreciate that. I'll try and answer that question like this, and it is a good question. I'll say that our cultural and a lot of other cultures used oral tradition, okay? And in my opinion, the oral, and they use whakairo, they carve symbols on wood to record history, significant types of history, and paintings, and even the tāmoko and the kauai were ways of recording information. Now, the oral transfer of knowledge was appropriate and the best way to explain, because the information was organic, or it related to the environment. The written history doesn't relate itself to the environment, in my own opinion, and not to be cynical about written history, which is the world we live in today. The written history gets caught up in interpretations and retrospective opinions, which change the whole context at a particular point in time for the deliverer. It gives the deliverer opportunities to deliver a one sentence or one line sentence to the listener in 100 different ways. In the oral tradition, the story is told and a picture is painted in the person that received it. It's my strong opinion, Karen, that we try to find the strength in ourselves to go to there to find the correct information and the correct way, or to find a bit of sanity, because at the moment, in this last 2 years with COVID, there's been very clear opposing opinions on this vaccine, for an example, and on the COVID and on the Omicron and on these all it's done, it's got nothing to do with information. All it's done, unlike the oral tradition, which is, romantic and sitting around the campfire and telling stories, or tuku kōrero, or handing down knowledge, this new philosophy of written language being recorded. So this last 2 years, is that all that information from the last 2 years, Karen, is it going to be handed on to the next generation? And what are they going to think about it? And what are they going to learn? And what does it look like in 100 years' time? What happened in our lifetime just in the last 2 years? Kia ora, Karen. I hope that's okay.
That is okay. And I just want to add just one little thing. Does the artifacts, like cultural artifacts that have been stolen and are around the world in different places, does that have any impact on expanding the history and supporting the history of that oral tradition in any way?
Oh, definitely, Karen. Some of the stories talk about those artifacts, so there's our validation that they belong to us, or they were taken from us. And the importance of getting those. In our culture, Karen, the artifacts or symbols, the different designs on the whakairo, we call aria. And unfortunately, with the, I'll say, onslaught of religion, symbols were not to be worshipped. Now, we didn't worship our symbols, we admired them, and they were our library. So to label them symbols of evil or, those things that, and to suggest that we were praying to them and doing those kinds of things, put it into a, this is another way of using antithesis. We'll take them off them. There are a lot of one particular religion here in Aotearoa on our marae will not allow those whakairo to be put in the whare. So they're very, very precious as far as the stories are concerned. They're very, very precious. In most cases, those whakairo or those symbols are our source of our history and our information. Karen, kia ora for that. I hope that's okay.
Yep, that's okay.
Awesome.
You did this symbol once when you were, it was like that. And I'll never forget it. So that's like the complete opposite, isn't it? So like antithesis, I think, of like completely inverted opposite sort of thing. And so, yeah, like that everything we were taught is not true. And so it's reverting it back, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, the truth, I won't say not true, Hagora, I'll say the truth is being hidden. So it is true, but it's true to hide the truth. If I can, on a personal, another symbol or another attempt at antithesis or the use of it, let's look at this, the tāmoko. So in my time of, I wonder if I should get it because I'm hearing you'll go porangi. You need to know te reo, you need to know whakairo, you need to know all of these cultural things. So we did some research, or I did my own research, and I found out that some of the young people back in the day, they began getting their tāmoko at a very, very young age as a teenager. So I'd like to share this if it's okay. And the types of, and the fear of getting that part on. So there was a point in time, okay, what is the antithesis of this symbol here? So it was explained like this, Hakora, and I believe it's a beautiful story and it needs to be shared. The forehead has 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and the tāmoko represents a manu, or a bird. The forehead carries the tail feathers, which gives a person direction. A bird flying through the air needs its tail feathers so it can be directed while it's flying, okay? The ihu, or the nose, right, is said to be the beak of the bird, right? And the top lip is the korero of the bird, which assists and helps what comes out of the waha, or the mouth, right? The chin holds the feet, giving stability when it's standing. Okay, the feet of the manu is there. Now, these lines coming down the side of the face here are the wings in the down position. Okay, so you can picture that. Now, these symbols or aria over here were explained to me to be old wind that has been used by those wings, and simply my mother and my father. Okay, so that's the antithesis of what we've all been told. There are a lot of my colleagues, I'll say, they haven't got and it's been indicated that you need your direction first. So those of us who are, and this isn't a criticism, this is the antithesis of what we've been told. Okay, that when I got my tāmoko, I was so appreciative to have those elders, and that was to be done first, or else you'll have no direction with what comes out of here. You'll have a bird flying in circles because it can't get direction in the wind, and it's trying to, you understand, it needs a tail. So I appreciate that. Now the maternal, or the kauai of the maternal was simply explained as two korero, or two penguins, greeting one another by hongi, and those are the patterns that are shown there. So we're talking about a relationship with the manu. Again, Karen, if I can say, these symbols represent the environment, the wind, the wings of the bird, the tail feathers of the bird, using the wind, the talk of the bird. So the whole environment is contributed towards the male. So I encourage all my colleagues out there that have that part of their tamoho, go and get some direction from so that your bird can fly properly in Tawhiri Mātea. So thank you for that, and appreciate that question of yours. Hakora, total opposite is a simple way to explain. Yes, you're right. Good, bad. That's the difference between that. So in saying that, e tātou mā, I hope that's okay, an easy way for you and those who are listening. If you need to ask someone about your history and the truth, I'll say, and what's been hidden, talk to the old people. And I'll consistently say that. They want to share with you, but you have to ask them. That's my opinion. You have to ask them. And those of you that are talking to the old people, tell everyone else in your family to talk to the old people, because you that are talking to the old people are getting knowledge, and you know that, and you know how to do it. Share that method on how you get to sit at the old people's feet, and all they do is just talk and share and share and share, and it's a beautiful, and your time will come when you get to share your knowledge, tuku korero. So in saying that, beautiful korero, thank you everybody. Nō reira huri no a tōna wā. Kia ora tātou.